Marcus Sterling had built his empire from nothing. Starting with a small tech company in his garage 23 years ago, he now owns Sterling Industries, a multinational corporation worth billions. His penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower overlooked the bustling city below, where thousands of people worked in buildings he owned, drove cars his companies manufactured, and used technology his teams had developed. But success had come at a price. His marriage to Elena had grown cold over the years. What started as a passionate romance had slowly transformed into a business arrangement. They attended charity galas together, posed for magazine covers, and maintained the perfect image of a power couple. Behind closed doors, however, they lived separate lives in their sprawling Manhattan mansion. Elena Sterling had once been a promising architect. She met Marcus when she was designing his first major office building. Her creativity and vision had captivated him, and within 2 years, they were married in what the media called the wedding of the century. But as Marcus's business demands grew, Elena found herself playing the role of the perfect trophy wife. She managed their household staff, organized elaborate dinner parties, and slowly watched her own dreams fade into the background. Their home employed a staff of 12 people. There was James, the head butler who had worked for the family for over a decade. Sarah managed the kitchen with her team of 3 sous chefs. The housekeeping staff included Maria, Rosa, and the newest addition to their team, 22-year-old Carmen Rodriguez. Carmen had immigrated from El Salvador with her mother when she was 15. She worked 2 jobs to put herself through community college while sending money back to her grandmother in San Salvador. The position at the Sterling Mansion was a blessing, the pay was generous, and the work, while demanding, allowed her to maintain her studies. She was quiet, hardworking, and had dreams of becoming a teacher someday. Elena had noticed Carmen immediately when she started working for them 6 months ago. There was something about the young woman's determination that reminded Elena of her younger self. Carmen worked with a focus and dedication that impressed everyone in the household. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, and always went above and beyond what was expected of her. What Elena didn't know was that Marcus had also noticed Carmen. It started innocently enough, a brief conversation in the hallway, a compliment on how well she maintained his study. But as the months passed, these interactions became more frequent and more personal. Marcus found himself looking forward to the quiet moments when he could speak with Carmen about her studies, her family, her dreams. For Carmen, Mr. Sterling was kind and encouraging in a way that surprised her. He asked about her classes, offered to help with her textbooks, and seemed genuinely interested in her goals. She admired his intelligence and work ethic, and she was grateful for his encouragement. What she didn't realize was that Marcus was developing feelings that went far beyond employer concern. The mansion operated like a well-oiled machine. Every morning at 6, the staff would begin their duties. Carmen's responsibilities included maintaining the main living areas, the library, and Marcus's private study. She took pride in her work, ensuring every surface was spotless, every book perfectly aligned, every piece of furniture positioned exactly as it should be. Elena's daily routine was predictable. She would wake at 9, have breakfast in the sunroom while reviewing her calendar, spend the morning on phone calls with various charity organizations, and dedicate her afternoons to planning events or shopping for the household. She rarely interacted directly with the staff beyond giving instructions to James, who would delegate tasks to the appropriate team members. Marcus's schedule was demanding. He would leave for the office before 7 and rarely return home before 8 in the evening. His weekends were often filled with business meetings, golf with clients, or social obligations with Elena. The pressure of running a global corporation left him feeling isolated despite being surrounded by people all day. It was during one of these long, stressful weeks that Marcus first found himself lingering in conversations with Carmen. She was reorganizing his study when he came home early from a canceled meeting. Instead of simply acknowledging her presence and moving on as he usually did, he asked about the book she was reading for her literature class. "It's 100 Years of Solitude," Carmen had said, her eyes lighting up as she discussed the magical realism and complex family dynamics in the novel. Marcus was struck by her insight and passion for learning. They talked for nearly an hour about books, about dreams, about the challenges of balancing work and education. These conversations became a regular occurrence. Marcus would find reasons to work from his study when Carmen was cleaning, and their discussions ranged from literature to philosophy to their different perspectives on success and happiness. For Marcus, these moments felt like a breath of fresh air in his otherwise suffocating routine. Carmen began to look forward to these talks as well. Mr. Sterling treated her as an intellectual equal, something she rarely
I
experienced in
can't
her
believe
other
this is
job at the
happening.
restaurant
We
or
have to
even
move
in some of
now
her college
before it's
classes.
too late.
He encouraged her to pursue her dreams and offered insights that helped her see possibilities she had never considered. Neither of them initially recognized the dangerous territory they were entering. What felt like innocent friendship was slowly becoming something more intimate and complicated. Elena, meanwhile, was dealing with her own struggles. At 41, she felt invisible in her own life. Her husband worked constantly, they had no children, and her days felt meaningless despite their material wealth. She had begun seeing a therapist, Dr. Patricia Hoffman, who encouraged her to reconnect with her architectural interests and consider what she truly wanted from life. "You've spent 15 years supporting Marcus's dreams," Dr. Hoffman had said during one of their sessions. "When was the last time you pursued your own?" The question haunted Elena. She had sacrificed her career, her independence, and her sense of purpose for a marriage that now felt more like a business partnership than a loving relationship. She began to consider what it would mean to reclaim her life. But the prospect of change felt overwhelming and frightening. The household dynamics continued normally on the surface, but underneath, tensions were building. Marcus found himself increasingly distracted at work, thinking about his conversations with Carmen. He began leaving the office earlier, telling his assistant he needed to work from home more often. His business partners noticed the change, but attributed it to stress from their latest merger negotiations. Carmen, for her part, was confused by her own feelings. She respected Mr. Sterling enormously and valued their conversations, but she also recognized that their relationship was becoming something that made her uncomfortable. She was a young woman with limited experience in such situations, and she didn't know how to navigate the growing complexity of their interactions. The first sign of trouble came on a rainy Thursday evening. Marcus had returned from a particularly difficult board meeting, feeling frustrated and defeated. Carmen was finishing her duties in the study when he arrived home. Instead of their usual literary discussion, Marcus found himself sharing his business concerns and personal frustrations. "Sometimes I wonder if any of this is worth it," he had said, gesturing at the expensive furnishings around them. "All this success, and for what? Elena and I barely speak anymore. I work 18-hour days to build something that feels increasingly empty." Carmen had listened with compassion, offering words of encouragement that touched Marcus more deeply than she intended. When she reached out to briefly touch his arm in a gesture of comfort, the moment lingered longer than it should have. Both of them felt the shift, the crossing of an invisible line that separated employer from employee, older man from young woman, married man from single woman. From that evening forward, their interactions took on a different quality. There was an undercurrent of tension and awareness that neither of them knew how to address. Marcus began finding more reasons to be home during Carmen's working hours. Carmen found herself taking extra care with her appearance on days when she knew he would be there. The situation was complicated by Carmen's genuine gratitude and admiration for Marcus. He had offered to pay for additional textbooks, had written a recommendation letter for a scholarship she was applying for, and had shown interest in her success in ways that no one else in her life had. The line between gratitude and deeper feelings became increasingly blurred. Elena, absorbed in her own struggles and therapy sessions, remained unaware of the developing situation. She had begun taking painting classes and was exploring the possibility of returning to architecture, perhaps starting with small residential projects. For the first time in years, she felt hope about her future, even if it meant making difficult decisions about her marriage. The staff noticed the changes in household dynamics, though they interpreted them differently. James observed that Mr. Sterling seemed more relaxed and spent more time at home, which he viewed as positive. Sarah noted that Carmen seemed distracted lately, but assumed it was stress from her studies and multiple jobs. Maria and Rosa, who worked most closely with Carmen, began to notice things that concerned them. They saw how Carmen's face would light up when Mr. Sterling entered a room, how she would linger in areas where she might encounter him, how she had begun asking them about his schedule and preferences. As older women with more life experience, they recognized the signs of a young woman developing inappropriate feelings for her employer. Rosa, in particular, felt protective of Carmen. She had been in similar situations in her youth and knew how easily a young woman could find herself in compromising circumstances with powerful men. She wanted to warn Carmen, but struggled with how to approach such a delicate subject without overstepping boundaries or making assumptions. The tension in the household reached a new level when Marcus made a decision that would change everything. During one of their conversations, Carmen had mentioned her dream of visiting the Metropolitan Museum of Art's new exhibition on Latin American architecture, but her inability to afford the entrance fee and time away from work. Without thinking through the implications, Marcus offered to take her to the exhibition on her day off. It would be educational, he had rationalized to himself. I'm supporting her academic interests. Carmen had accepted the invitation with excitement and gratitude, not fully considering how such an outing might be perceived by others or what it might lead to. The prospect of spending an entire afternoon discussing architecture and art with someone who appreciated her intellect felt like a wonderful opportunity. The day of their museum visit was a turning point. Marcus picked up Carmen at her small apartment in Queens, and during the drive to Manhattan, their conversation flowed naturally. At the museum, they spent hours examining the exhibits, discussing design principles, and sharing their thoughts on creativity and cultural expression. Marcus was struck by Carmen's sophisticated understanding of architectural concepts and her passionate responses to the artwork. Carmen was thrilled to have someone who took her academic interests seriously and who could engage with her on an intellectual level. For both of them, the afternoon felt like a perfect escape from their respective daily realities. The danger came during the drive back to Carmen's apartment.
This cannot be
The
happening.
conversation
We
had
have to
grown
do
more
something
personal,
now.
I
with
didn't mean
Marcus
for it to
sharing
go this
details
far.
about his early struggles to build his business, and Carmen talking about her family's immigration experience and her determination to honor their sacrifices through her education. When they arrived at Carmen's building, Marcus walked her to the door, and, in a moment of impulse, he kissed her. It was brief and tender, more emotional than passionate, but it crossed a line that neither of them could uncross. Carmen was surprised but didn't pull away immediately, and in that hesitation, both of them recognized that their relationship had fundamentally changed. The aftermath of that kiss created a storm of conflicting emotions for both of them. Marcus was filled with guilt about betraying his marriage vows and potentially compromising Carmen's position in his household. Carmen was confused about her feelings, grateful for his attention and kindness, but also aware of the impossibility and inappropriateness of any romantic relationship between them. They agreed to pretend the kiss never happened and to maintain professional boundaries going forward. But both of them knew that such moments couldn't simply be erased. The awareness of their mutual attraction and the memory of that brief intimacy colored every subsequent interaction. Elena, still unaware of these developments, was making her own decision about the future. Her therapy sessions had given her clarity about her desire to reclaim her independence and pursue her architectural dreams. She had begun reaching out to former colleagues and exploring opportunities to restart her career, even if it meant significant changes to her lifestyle and marriage. The three lives, Marcus's, Elena's, and Carmen's, were on trajectories that would soon intersect in ways none of them anticipated. The secrets, the suppressed feelings, the growing tensions, and the unresolved conflicts were building toward a confrontation that would shatter the careful facade that had maintained peace in the Sterling household. As autumn approached, the atmosphere in the mansion grew heavier with unspoken tensions. Marcus struggled with his feelings for Carmen while trying to maintain his professional responsibilities and marriage. Carmen worked with growing anxiety about her situation, torn between her gratitude to the Sterling family and her inappropriate feelings for Marcus. Elena moved forward with her plans for independence, unaware that her husband was grappling with his own crisis of conscience and fidelity. The staff continued their duties, but the undercurrents of tension the weeks following the museum visit created an unbearable tension in the Sterling mansion. Marcus threw himself into work with renewed intensity, staying late at the office and scheduling back-to-back meetings to avoid being home during Carmen's working hours. When he did encounter her in the hallways or study, their interactions were painfully formal, a stark contrast to the easy conversations they had shared before. Carmen felt the change immediately and deeply. The man who had encouraged her dreams and treated her as an intellectual equal now barely acknowledged her presence. She began to question whether their previous conversations had meant anything to him, or if she had simply been naive about his intentions. The confusion and hurt affected her work performance, and she found herself making small mistakes that she never would have made before. Elena noticed the shift in household dynamics, though she misinterpreted the source. She observed that Marcus seemed more stressed than usual, and that Carmen appeared withdrawn and distracted. Assuming it was related to the pressures of running such a large household, Elena decided to take a more active role in staff management, something she had largely delegated to James in previous years. This decision led to Elena spending more time observing the daily operations of their home. She began having weekly meetings with each department head and occasionally checking on the work being done throughout the mansion. It was during one of these impromptu inspections that she first noticed something unusual about Carmen's behavior. Carmen had been cleaning Marcus's study when Elena entered to review some paperwork. The young woman's face flushed immediately, and she began stammering apologies for being in the room, even though it was part of her regular duties. Elena found the reaction strange, but didn't think much of it at first. The second incident occurred a few days later when Elena decided to reorganize Marcus's home office. As she went through his desk drawers, she found a small piece of paper with Carmen's class schedule written in Marcus's handwriting, along with notes about textbooks and scholarship deadlines. The discovery puzzled Elena. Why would Marcus have such detailed information about their maid's academic life? Elena's curiosity was further aroused when she overheard Rosa and Maria speaking in Spanish in the kitchen. Though her Spanish was limited, she caught Carmen's name mentioned several times, along with words that sounded like warnings or concerns. When she entered the kitchen, the conversation stopped abruptly, and both women busied themselves with their tasks. That evening, Elena confronted Marcus about the paper she had found. She approached the topic carefully, not wanting to seem accusatory, but genuinely confused about his involvement in Carmen's education. "I found this in your desk," she said, showing him the handwritten schedule. "Are we sponsoring Carmen's education in some formal way?" Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he looked at the paper. He had forgotten about making those notes during one of their conversations about her scholarship applications. "She mentioned needing help with some applications," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "I thought we could provide a reference or perhaps contribute to her educational expenses." It seemed like good corporate social responsibility. Elena accepted the explanation, but something about Marcus's demeanor made her uneasy. He avoided eye contact and seemed more defensive than the situation warranted. She filed the observation away in her mind, along with her other recent concerns about the household dynamics. Meanwhile, Carmen was struggling with her own internal conflict. The emotional distance Marcus had imposed since their museum visit felt like punishment for something she wasn't sure she had done wrong. She replayed their interactions constantly, wondering if she had misinterpreted his kindness or if she had somehow encouraged something inappropriate. Her academic performance began to suffer as well. Her literature professor, Dr. Martinez, noticed that her recent essays lacked the insight and passion that had previously distinguished her work. When he asked if everything was all right, Carmen assured him that she was simply dealing with work stress, but she couldn't concentrate on her studies when her mind was constantly occupied with her confusing feelings about her employer. The situation became more complicated when Marcus's business pressures intensified. Sterling Industries was negotiating a major merger with a European technology firm, and the deal required Marcus's constant attention. The stress of the negotiations, combined with his guilt about his feelings for Carmen and his growing dissatisfaction with his marriage, began affecting his judgment and emotional stability. Elena, meanwhile, had made significant progress in her therapy and personal development. Dr. Hoffman had helped her recognize that she had been living her life according to other people's expectations rather than her own desires. Elena decided to take a bold step. She reached out to her former architecture mentor, Professor Williams, about the possibility of returning to school to complete her master's degree. Professor Williams was delighted to hear from Elena and encouraged her to apply for the graduate program. "You had exceptional talent," he told her during their phone conversation. "It's never too late to pursue your passion." The prospect of returning to architecture filled Elena with excitement she hadn't felt in years. However, she knew that pursuing graduate studies would require significant changes in her lifestyle and potentially in her marriage. She wasn't sure how Marcus would react to her plans, especially given his current stress levels and distracted behavior. The tension in the Sterling household reached a breaking point on a cold November evening. Marcus had returned from an especially difficult day of merger negotiations, feeling frustrated and emotionally drained. Elena was out at a charity board meeting, and the house felt particularly empty and lonely. Carmen was working late, finishing some tasks in the main living areas that had been delayed due to a dinner party Elena had hosted the previous evening. She was alone in the house except for James, who was in his quarters, and the night security guard. Marcus found Carmen in the library, carefully dusting the rare book collection that was one of his prized possessions. The sight of her gentle care for his belongings, combined with his emotional vulnerability, broke down the barriers he had tried so hard to maintain. "Carmen," he said softly, causing her to turn around with surprise. "Mr. Sterling," she replied, immediately straightening and preparing to leave the room. "I can finish this tomorrow if you need the library." "No, please don't go," he said, and something in his voice made her pause. "I owe you an apology." Carmen set down her dusting cloth and looked at him with confusion. "An apology, sir? For the way I've been treating you these past weeks? For the distance? For the coldness? You didn't deserve that." Carmen felt her heart race. "I understand that you need to maintain professional boundaries, Mr. Sterling. I never expected anything different. But it's more than that," Marcus said, moving closer to her. "I've been distant because I'm afraid of my feelings for you. What happened at the museum, what I did, it was wrong, but not because I didn't mean it." Carmen stared at him, unsure how to respond. Part of her was thrilled to hear that he had feelings for her, but another part recognized the impossibility of their situation. "Mr. Sterling, I don't think we should be having this conversation," she said quietly. "You're right," he agreed. "But I can't pretend anymore that I don't care about you. These past months, talking with you, seeing your passion for learning, watching you work toward your dreams, you've reminded me of what it feels like to be truly interested in someone." Carmen felt tears welling in her eyes. "But you're married. And I work for you. This can't happen." "I know," Marcus said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I know all the reasons why this is wrong. But I can't stop thinking about you." Before Carmen could respond, they heard Elena's car pulling into the driveway. Marcus immediately stepped back, and Carmen quickly resumed her dusting, both of them trying to appear normal as Elena's footsteps approached the front door. Elena entered the house feeling energized from her charity meeting, but also eager to share her news about the graduate program application with Marcus. She headed toward the library, where she could see lights on, expecting to find her husband reading as he often did in the evenings. Instead, she found Marcus standing near the fireplace and Carmen dusting nearby. Both of them seemed startled by her arrival, and Elena immediately sensed an atmosphere of tension that she couldn't quite identify. "Hello," she said, looking between them. "I didn't realize you were still working, Carmen." "I was just finishing up, Mrs. Sterling," Carmen replied, her voice slightly shaky. "I'll be done in just a few minutes." "That's fine," Elena said, still feeling that something was off about the scene. "Marcus, could I speak with you about something when you have a moment?" "Of course," Marcus replied, clearly relieved to have an interruption. "Carmen, thank you for staying late to finish this. You can head home now if you'd like." Carmen nodded quickly, gathered her supplies, and left the room without making eye contact with either of them. As her footsteps faded down the hallway, Elena studied her husband's face. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "You both seemed rather tense just now." "Just discussing some household matters," Marcus said, but his explanation felt forced and unconvincing. Elena decided not to pursue the issue immediately. Instead, she shared her exciting news about the graduate program and her plans to return to architecture. She expected Marcus to be supportive, or at least interested, but his reaction was distracted and lukewarm. "That sounds like a significant commitment," he said. "Are you sure you want to take on something so demanding right now?" Elena felt deflated by his response. "I thought you would be happy for me. This is something I've wanted to pursue for years." "I am happy for you," Marcus said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm just concerned about the timing, with everything else going on." "What else is going on?" Elena asked, genuinely confused. "The merger negotiations?" "Among other things," Marcus replied vaguely. Elena felt a growing sense that her husband was keeping something from her, but she wasn't sure what or how to address it. The conversation ended with both of them feeling unsatisfied and more distant from each other than before. After Elena went to bed that night, Marcus remained in the library, thinking about his conversation with Carmen and the impossible situation he had created. He knew that his feelings for the young woman were inappropriate and potentially destructive, but he couldn't seem to control them. The guilt about betraying Elena's trust warred with his genuine emotional connection to Carmen. Carmen, meanwhile, lay awake in her small apartment, replaying every word of their conversation. She was torn between her feelings for Marcus and her recognition of how wrong the situation was. She thought about her mother, who cleaned houses and worked multiple jobs to support their family, and wondered what she would think about her daughter's involvement with her married employer. The next few days passed in uncomfortable tension. Carmen seriously considered quitting her position at the Sterling mansion, but the job was crucial to her financial stability and her ability to continue her education. She also couldn't deny that, despite the complications, she valued her connection with Marcus more than she should have. Marcus attempted to return to his previous pattern of avoiding Carmen, but the emotional conversation in the library had made their mutual attraction even more difficult to ignore. He found himself looking for her throughout the house and feeling disappointed when their schedules didn't align. Elena began paying closer attention to the household dynamics and her husband's behavior. She noticed that Marcus seemed distracted during their conversations, that he was spending more time working from home, and that there was a general atmosphere of tension among the staff. Her therapist encouraged her to trust her instincts and to address her concerns directly rather than letting them fester. The situation reached another critical point when Elena decided to surprise Marcus with lunch at home one afternoon. She had been feeling disconnected from him and hoped that a spontaneous romantic gesture might help bridge the growing gap in their relationship. Elena arrived home unexpectedly to find the house quieter than usual. James informed her that most of the staff were running errands or handling tasks outside the house, but that Carmen was working in Marcus's study and Marcus was taking calls in his home office. As Elena approached the study to see if Carmen needed anything, she heard voices through the partially open door. What she heard stopped her in her tracks. "I can't stop thinking about you either," she heard Carmen saying in a voice filled with emotion. "But this is so wrong. You have a wife, and I'm just the maid." "You're not just anything," Marcus's voice responded. Elena spent the rest of that afternoon in a state of emotional turmoil. She drove aimlessly through the city, trying to process what she had overheard and decide on her next steps. The betrayal cut deep, but what surprised her was that alongside the hurt and anger, she also felt a strange sense of relief. For months, she had sensed that something was wrong in her household, and now she finally had answers. When she returned home that evening, Elena watched Marcus carefully during dinner. He seemed distracted and guilty, avoiding eye contact and giving short responses to her attempts at conversation. She found herself studying his face, wondering how long the affair had been going on and how she had missed the signs for so long. After dinner, Elena retreated to her private sitting room and called Dr. Hoffman for an emergency session. Over the phone, she shared what she had discovered, trying to keep her voice steady as she recounted the conversation she had overheard. "How are you feeling about this revelation?" Dr. Hoffman asked. "Hurt, obviously. Betrayed. But also," Elena paused, searching for the right words. "Also relieved, in a way. I've been feeling like something was wrong for so long, and now I know what it was. And honestly angry. Not just at Marcus, but at myself for being so blind. What do you think you want to do with this information?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to confront them immediately, but another part wants to understand the situation better first. Carmen is so young, and she's in such a vulnerable position. I'm not sure how much of this is manipulation and how much is genuine feeling. Dr. Hoffman guided Elena through her options and helped her think through the potential consequences of different approaches. They agreed that Elena should take some time to process her emotions before making any major decisions about how to proceed. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling with his own guilt and confusion. The conversation with Carmen in the library had made their mutual attraction impossible to ignore, but it had also highlighted the impossibility of their situation. He found himself unable to concentrate on his work and increasingly irritated with everyone around him. The merger negotiations that had been consuming his professional attention were reaching a critical phase, but Marcus found it difficult to focus on the complex financial details when his personal life felt like it was spiraling out of control. His business partners began expressing concerns about his distracted behavior during crucial meetings. Carmen, for her part, was seriously considering quitting her position at the Sterling mansion. The emotional strain of working in the same house as Marcus, while trying to suppress her feelings for him, was becoming unbearable. She had begun looking for other employment opportunities, but the pay and flexibility of her current job would be difficult to replace. Her academic performance continued to suffer as well. Her literature professor, Dr. Martinez, called her into his office to express concern about her recent work. "Carmen, your early papers this semester showed such promise," he said. "But your recent assignments seem rushed and lack the depth of analysis I know you're capable of. Is there something going on that's affecting your studies?" Carmen struggled to find an appropriate response. She couldn't very well explain that she was dealing with complicated feelings for her married employer. "I've been having some personal issues," she said finally. "I'm hoping to resolve them soon. If you need to talk to someone, or if you need help connecting with campus resources, please don't hesitate to ask," Dr. Martinez offered. "You're one of my most talented students, and I hate to see you struggling." Carmen thanked him for his concern, but felt even more isolated by her inability to discuss the real source of her problems. She was caught between her feelings for Marcus, her gratitude for the opportunities the Sterling family had provided, and her recognition that the situation was unsustainable. The tension in the Sterling household continued to build over the following week. Elena found herself watching both Marcus and Carmen carefully, looking for signs of their relationship and trying to understand the dynamics between them. She noticed how Carmen's face would change when Marcus entered a room, how Marcus would find excuses to be present when Carmen was working, and how both of them seemed nervous and guilty in her presence. Elena also began paying more attention to the other staff members and their reactions to the situation. She observed that Rosa and Maria seemed protective of Carmen and suspicious of the household dynamics. James, as always, maintained his professional discretion but seemed more tense than usual. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Elena decided to work late in her home office, which was located near Marcus's study. She heard Marcus and Carmen talking again, and this time their conversation was even more intimate than what she had overheard before. "I keep thinking about that afternoon at the museum," Marcus was saying. "It was the first time in years that I felt truly happy." "I think about it too," Carmen replied softly. "But thinking about it makes everything else more difficult. I don't know how to be around you anymore without feeling confused and guilty." "Maybe we should stop trying to fight this," Marcus suggested. "Maybe we should just accept how we feel about each other." "But what about your wife? What about my job, my future? I can't be the other woman, Mr. Sterling. I won't do that to Mrs. Sterling, and I won't do that to myself." Elena felt her heart racing as she listened to their conversation. The pain of hearing her husband discuss his feelings for another woman was intense, but she was also struck by Carmen's moral stance and her consideration for Elena's feelings. "Elena and I have been essentially separated for years," Marcus said. "We live in the same house, but we don't have a real marriage anymore. You know that." "That doesn't make this right," Carmen insisted. "And it doesn't change the fact that I work for you, that you have all the power in this situation. If people found out about this, who do you think would be blamed? Who do you think would lose everything?" Elena was surprised to find herself feeling a grudging respect for Carmen's perspective. The young woman was clearly thinking about the situation more carefully than Marcus was. That night, Elena made a decision. Instead of confronting Marcus and Carmen directly, she decided to approach Carmen privately the next day. She wanted to understand the young woman's perspective and to assess how exploitative the situation might be. The next morning, Elena waited until Marcus had left for the office and most of the other staff were occupied with their duties. She found Carmen working in the guest bedrooms on the second floor. "Carmen," Elena said, entering the room quietly. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Carmen looked up with immediate anxiety. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling. Is there something wrong with my work?" "No, your work is fine," Elena assured her. "I wanted to talk to you about something else. Please, sit down." Carmen perched nervously on the edge of a chair, clearly terrified about what Elena might want to discuss. "I know about your relationship with my husband," Elena said directly, watching Carmen's face carefully. Carmen's face went pale, and she immediately stood up. "Mrs. Sterling, I can explain. Please sit down," Elena said gently. "I'm not here to fire you or to blame you. I want to understand what's been happening." Carmen slowly sat back down, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen, Mrs. Sterling. I swear I didn't encourage it." "Tell me how it started," Elena said, and her tone was surprisingly calm and non-accusatory. Over the next hour, Carmen told Elena everything. She described how the relationship had begun with academic discussions, how Marcus had shown interest in her education and dreams, how their conversations had gradually become more personal, and how she had found herself developing feelings that she knew were inappropriate. "I've been thinking about quitting," Carmen said through her tears. "I know this situation is wrong, and I know I need to remove myself from it. But this job is so important to my family's finances, and Mr. Sterling wrote me a recommendation letter for scholarships." Elena listened carefully to Carmen's account, asking questions to understand the timeline and the nature of their interactions. What emerged was a picture of a young woman who had been genuinely grateful for Marcus's encouragement and mentorship, but who had gradually found herself in a situation that was beyond her experience to handle appropriately. "Has my husband ever pressured you physically or sexually?" Elena asked directly. "No," Carmen said immediately. "He kissed me once, after we went to the museum, but he stopped when I seemed uncertain. He's never tried to force anything or use his position to pressure me. I think he's as confused about this as I am." Elena felt a complex mix of emotions as she listened to Carmen's story. She was hurt by her husband's betrayal, but she was also concerned about Carmen's vulnerability and impressed by the young woman's moral clarity about the situation. "What do you think should happen now?" Elena asked. Carmen wiped her tears and looked directly at Elena. "I think I should quit my job here. I think Mr. Sterling and I should stop having personal conversations. And I think you and Mr. Sterling should talk about your marriage without me being a factor." Elena was struck by Carmen's maturity and her willingness to take responsibility for her part in the situation. "Where would you go if you quit? How would you support yourself and your studies?" "I don't know," Carmen admitted. "But staying here and continuing this situation isn't fair to you, and it's not good for any of us." Elena spent the rest of the day thinking about her conversation with Carmen. That evening, she finally confronted Marcus directly about the affair. "I know about you and Carmen," she said without preamble as Marcus entered their bedroom. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks, his face showing a mixture of guilt and relief. "Elena, I can explain." "No," Elena said firmly. "I don't want explanations right now. I want you to listen to me." Elena told Marcus about her conversations with both Carmen and Dr. Hoffman, about her plans to return to graduate school, and about her growing recognition that their marriage had been unfulfilling for both of them for years. "I'm not going to pretend that your relationship with Carmen doesn't hurt," she said. "But I'm also not going to pretend that our marriage has been working. We've been living like strangers for years, Marcus. We both know that." Marcus sat heavily in a chair, looking older than Elena had ever seen him. "I don't know how this happened," he said quietly. "I never intended to develop feelings for Carmen. But talking with her, seeing her passion for learning and life, it reminded me of feelings I thought I had lost." "And what about our marriage?" Elena asked. What about the life we built together? Marcus was quiet for a long time. I don't think either of us has been happy for years, he said finally. We've been going through the motions, maintaining appearances, but we haven't really been partners in any meaningful way. Elena nodded, feeling sad but also relieved to hear him acknowledge what she had been feeling. So what do we do now? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I care about Carmen, but I also know that a relationship with her is probably impossible for all the reasons she's pointed out. And I don't know if our marriage can be saved or if we even want to save it. Elena and Marcus talked through the night, having the most honest conversation they had shared in years. They discussed their mutual dissatisfaction with their relationship, their individual dreams and goals, and the practical considerations of potentially separating after 15 years of marriage. By morning, they had reached some preliminary agreements. Marcus would end his inappropriate relationship with Carmen immediately. Elena would continue with her plans to return to graduate school. They would both work with Dr. Hoffman to determine whether their marriage could be rebuilt or whether they should pursue separation. Most importantly for Carmen, they agreed that she should keep her position if she wanted to, and that they would provide her with references and support for her education regardless of what happened with their personal situation. When Elena approached Carmen the next day to share these decisions, the young woman was overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. I was so afraid that I had destroyed everything, Carmen said. I was afraid you would hate me, and that I would lose this job, and that I would have ruined your marriage. The weeks following Elena's confrontation with Marcus and Carmen brought a strange new dynamic to the Sterling household. The explosive secret was no longer hidden, but its aftermath created different tensions and challenges for everyone involved. Marcus threw himself into work with even greater intensity than before, using the demanding merger negotiations as a way to avoid dealing with his complicated emotions. The deal with the European technology firm required frequent travel, and Marcus began scheduling longer business trips than were strictly necessary. The distance from home provided relief from the daily reminders of his failed marriage and his feelings for Carmen. However, the business pressure was mounting as well. The merger had hit several unexpected obstacles, including regulatory concerns and cultural clashes between the two corporate teams. Marcus's distracted state during crucial negotiations had not gone unnoticed by his business partners and the board of directors. Richard Hawthorne, Sterling Industries' longtime attorney and one of Marcus's closest advisors, requested a private meeting to discuss his concerns about Marcus's recent performance. Marcus, I've known you for 15 years, Richard said during their lunch at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant. I've never seen you this unfocused during important negotiations. The European deal is worth $3 billion, and your lack of attention to detail is starting to worry our partners. Marcus knew Richard was right, but he struggled to explain his personal situation without revealing inappropriate details about his household. I'm going through some personal issues, he said finally. Elena and I are having marital problems, and it's affecting my concentration. I'm sorry to hear that, Richard replied. But you need to find a way to compartmentalize your personal life during business hours. The board is starting to ask questions about your commitment to this deal. The conversation served as a wake-up call for Marcus. He realized that his emotional turmoil was threatening not only his marriage and household, but also the business empire he had spent decades building. He made a conscious effort to refocus on his professional responsibilities, but the underlying personal issues remained unresolved. Elena, meanwhile, was experiencing a renaissance of purpose and energy. Her acceptance into the graduate architecture program had given her something positive to focus on during the difficult period of marital uncertainty. She threw herself into preparing for her return to school, purchasing textbooks, setting up a study space in her sitting room, and reconnecting with former colleagues in the architecture field. Her therapy sessions with Dr. Hoffman became even more valuable as she worked through the complex emotions surrounding her husband's affair and her own future plans. The discovery of Marcus's relationship with Carmen had been painful, but it had also clarified many things about their marriage that Elena had been reluctant to acknowledge. I think I stayed in this marriage for so long because it was comfortable and secure, Elena told Dr. Hoffman during one of their sessions. Even when I was unhappy, It was easier to maintain the status quo than to face the uncertainty of change. And how do you feel about change now? Dr. Hoffman asked. Scared, but also excited, Elena admitted. For the first time in years, I feel like I have control over my own life. The affair was devastating, but it also forced me to stop pretending that everything was fine. Elena also began developing an unexpected relationship with Carmen. Their initial conversation about the affair had revealed a mature, thoughtful young woman who was genuinely remorseful about her role in the situation. Elena found herself impressed by Carmen's integrity and her determination to do the right thing despite the personal cost. Carmen had indeed maintained strict professional boundaries with Marcus since their confrontation. She performed her duties efficiently and professionally, but avoided any personal conversations or situations that might create inappropriate intimacy. The change was difficult for both her and Marcus, but she was committed to honoring her agreement with Elena. The young woman also continued to struggle with her own emotions and guilt about the situation. She had developed genuine feelings for Marcus that couldn't simply be turned off, but she was determined not to act on them. Her studies provided some distraction, but the daily reminder of working in the same house as Marcus made it difficult to move past the emotional attachment. Elena began offering Carmen guidance on her academic pursuits, reviewing her essays, and providing feedback on her scholarship applications. She discovered that Carmen was indeed an exceptional student with insights into literature and culture that impressed Elena. Their conversations about academic topics gradually expanded to include discussions about life goals, family expectations, and the challenges of pursuing education while working to support family members. You remind me of myself when I was your age, Elena told Carmen one afternoon as they reviewed a draft of Carmen's scholarship essay. Ambitious, idealistic, determined to prove yourself through your accomplishments. What changed? Carmen asked. You're still accomplished. You have this beautiful home. You're married to a successful man. You're about to return to graduate school. Elena considered the question carefully. I think I lost sight of my own dreams for a while. I became so focused on supporting Marcus's ambitions that I forgot to pursue my own. That's why returning to architecture feels so important to me now. Carmen nodded thoughtfully. I worry sometimes that I'm being selfish by pursuing my education when my family needs my financial support. Education is never selfish, Elena said firmly. It's an investment in your future and ultimately in your ability to help your family even more. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for wanting to better yourself. These conversations provided both women with something positive to focus on during a difficult time. Elena enjoyed mentoring someone who appreciated her intelligence and experience, while Carmen benefited from having an educated, successful woman take an interest in her development. The other household staff gradually adjusted to the new dynamics as well. Rosa and Maria, who had been worried about Carmen's involvement with Marcus, were relieved to see that the young woman was maintaining appropriate boundaries. James continued to manage the household with his usual discretion, but Elena noticed that he seemed more relaxed now that the underlying tensions were being addressed openly. However, not all the changes in the Sterling household were positive. The strain of the situation began affecting Marcus in ways that concerned everyone around him. He became increasingly irritable and impatient with staff members, snapping at people over minor issues, and showing signs of stress that were uncharacteristic for him. One evening, Elena witnessed an incident that alarmed her. Marcus had returned from a particularly difficult business trip to find that some papers in his study had been moved during cleaning. He exploded at Carmen, accusing her of disorganizing important documents and threatening to fire her for incompetence. Marcus, stop, Elena interrupted, entering the study after hearing his raised voice. Carmen was following my instructions to deep clean your office while you were away. If anything was moved, it was my responsibility, not hers. Carmen stood frozen in the middle of the room, clearly shaken by Marcus's angry outburst. She had been scrupulously professional in her interactions with him for weeks, and the sudden attack felt particularly unfair. I apologize, Carmen, Marcus said after a moment, realizing that his reaction had been disproportionate to the situation. You were just doing your job. I'm dealing with some stress at work, but that's no excuse for taking it out on you. Carmen nodded and quietly left the room. But Elena could see that the incident had upset her deeply. After Carmen was gone, Elena confronted Marcus about his behavior. "That was completely inappropriate," she said firmly. "Carmen has been nothing but professional since we talked about this situation. You cannot use her as an emotional punching bag because you're frustrated about other things." Marcus slumped into his desk chair, looking exhausted and defeated. "You're right. I don't know what's wrong with me lately. The business is falling apart. Our marriage is over. And I can't even be in the same room as Carmen without feeling guilty and confused." "The business isn't falling apart," Elena corrected. "Richard told me about the merger difficulties, but you've overcome worse challenges before. And our marriage isn't necessarily over. It's just changing. But you need to get your emotions under control before you damage other people who don't deserve it." Elena's words served as another wake-up call for Marcus. He realized that his inability to process his feelings was affecting not only his own well-being, but also the people around him, particularly Carmen, who was already in a vulnerable position. The next day, Marcus made a point of apologizing to Carmen again and assuring her that his outburst had nothing to do with her performance. He also began seeing a therapist of his own, Dr. James Mitchell, who specialized in helping high-powered executives manage stress and personal transitions. Dr. Mitchell helped Marcus understand that his attraction to Carmen had been, at least partially, a symptom of his dissatisfaction with his marriage and his need for emotional connection. The young woman's intelligence, passion, and admiration had provided him with feelings that had been missing from his relationship with Elena for years. "The question now, Dr. Mitchell said during one of their sessions, is whether you can find those feelings in a more appropriate relationship, and whether your marriage to Elena can be rebuilt to provide the emotional intimacy you've been missing." Marcus wasn't sure about the answer to either question, but he was committed to figuring it out without causing further harm to Carmen or Elena. Meanwhile, Carmen was working with her own counselor at the college, Dr. Sarah Chun, to process her experiences and emotions. Dr. Chun helped Carmen understand that her feelings for Marcus, while genuine, had developed in a context of unequal power that made them inherently problematic. "It's natural to develop admiration and even romantic feelings for someone who shows interest in your mind and your dreams," Dr. Chun explained. "But it's important to recognize when those feelings develop in circumstances that make them unhealthy or impossible to pursue." Carmen found these sessions helpful in under 6 months after the initial revelation about Marcus and Carmen's relationship. The Sterling household had undergone a complete transformation. The changes that began with painful confrontations and difficult conversations had evolved into a new structure that, while different from what any of them had originally envisioned, proved to be healthier and more honest for everyone involved. Marcus had successfully completed the European merger after regaining his focus through therapy and determined effort. Dr. Mitchell's guidance had helped him understand that his emotional crisis had stemmed from years of neglecting his personal relationships in favor of business success. The merger's completion marked not only a professional triumph, but also a personal milestone in his journey toward better self-awareness. However, the most significant change in Marcus's life was his decision to step back from the day-to-day operations of Sterling Industries. After the merger, he appointed Richard Hawthorne as CEO, while retaining his position as chairman of the board. This transition allowed him to maintain oversight of his business empire while creating space for personal growth and relationship repair. "For 25 years, I've defined myself entirely by my professional success," Marcus told Dr. Mitchell during one of their sessions. "I'm finally ready to discover who I am when I'm not working 18 hours a day." Marcus used his newfound time to pursue interests he had neglected for decades. He began reading literature again, took up photography, and even enrolled in a philosophy course at Columbia University. These activities helped him develop a sense of identity beyond his business accomplishments and provided common ground for rebuilding his relationship with Elena. Elena had flourished in graduate school beyond her wildest expectations. Her professors were impressed by her maturity and life experience, and she quickly became one of the top students in her program. Her thesis project focused on sustainable housing design for low-income communities, combining her architectural skills with her growing social consciousness. The return to academia had reignited Elena's passion and confidence in ways that surprised even her. She formed friendships with classmates half her age and found herself energized by late-night study sessions and collaborative projects. For the first time in years, she felt intellectually challenged and personally fulfilled. Her relationship with Marcus had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. While they had decided not to pursue divorce, they had also acknowledged that their marriage as it previously existed was over. Instead, they developed what Dr. Hoffman called a conscious partnership, a relationship based on mutual respect, shared goals, and honest communication rather than romantic passion or traditional marital expectations. "We're better friends now than we've been in years," Elena confided to Dr. Hoffman. "We talk about our projects, our goals, our thoughts about life. It's not the marriage I thought I wanted, but it's a relationship I actually value." Marcus and Elena maintained separate bedrooms and pursued their individual interests, but they also spent time together discussing architecture, philosophy, and their plans for the future. They discovered that they enjoyed each other's company when the pressure of trying to maintain a romantic relationship was removed. Carmen had experienced perhaps the most dramatic positive transformation of all. With Elena's mentorship and encouragement, she had applied for and received a full scholarship to transfer to Columbia University for her final 2 years of undergraduate study. The scholarship covered not only tuition but also provided a modest living stipend, allowing her to quit her second job at the restaurant and focus entirely on her education. She continued working part-time for the Sterlings, but in a new capacity. Elena had hired her as a research assistant for her graduate thesis project, and Marcus had offered her a position helping with the Sterling Foundation's educational scholarship program. These roles provided valuable experience related to Carmen's career goals while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Carmen's academic performance had improved dramatically once she was able to focus fully on her studies. She was majoring in education with a minor in social work, and her professors consistently praised her insightful analysis and passionate commitment to social justice issues. "Carmen has the potential to make a real difference in the world," Dr. Martinez, her literature professor, told her during their final meeting. "Her writing shows not only intellectual sophistication but also genuine empathy and a desire to create positive change." The young woman had also developed a romantic relationship with David Chun, a graduate student in the education program who shared her passion for working with underserved communities. David appreciated Carmen's intelligence and determination, and their relationship provided her with the healthy emotional connection she had been seeking. "It's wonderful to be with someone who supports my goals and doesn't make me feel guilty for being ambitious," Carmen told Elena during one of their research sessions. "David and I are planning to work together on literacy programs after we graduate." The other members of the Sterling household staff had also benefited from the increased transparency and honesty in the home's management. Elena's more active involvement in household operations had led to better working conditions, clearer expectations, and more generous benefits for all the employees. Rosa and Maria, in particular, appreciated Elena's efforts to learn Spanish and her interest in their families and backgrounds. James found that the reduced tension in the household made his job easier and more pleasant. The entire staff noticed that both Mr. and Mrs. Sterling seemed happier and more approachable than they had been in years. The Sterling Foundation, which had previously been largely a tax management tool, became a genuine focus of philanthropic effort under Elena and Marcus's renewed attention. They established scholarship programs for first-generation college students, funded community architecture projects, and supported literacy programs in low-income neighborhoods. Carmen played a key role in developing these programs, bringing insight from her own experiences as well as research skills she was developing through her academic work. Her involvement helped ensure that the Foundation's efforts were grounded in real understanding of the communities they aimed to serve. "Carmen's perspective has been invaluable," Elena told Marcus during one of their Foundation planning meetings. "She understands the challenges facing students from backgrounds similar to hers in ways that we simply can't, despite our good intentions." The transformation in their relationships had not been without challenges. Marcus struggled with occasional feelings of loss and regret about the changes in his life. There were times when he missed the simplicity of his former workaholic lifestyle and the clear metrics of business success. Sometimes I wonder if I've given up too much, he confided to Dr. Mitchell. I was really good at running a company. I'm not sure I'm as good at this more balanced life. Dr. Mitchell helped Marcus understand that learning to live a more balanced life was a skill that required practice, just like any other competency. You spent 25 years becoming an expert at business, he pointed out. It's unrealistic to expect yourself to immediately master personal relationships and life balance. Elena also faced challenges as she adjusted to her new independence and identity. There were moments when the demands of graduate school felt overwhelming, especially when combined with her foundation work and the ongoing process of redefining her marriage. I'm 42 years old, and sometimes I feel like I'm trying to figure out who I am for the first time, she told Dr. Hoffman. It's exciting, but also terrifying. Carmen's journey wasn't without difficulties either. Despite her academic success and new opportunities, she sometimes struggled with imposter syndrome and the feeling that she didn't belong in the elite academic environment of Columbia University. Sometimes I sit in seminars with students who went to private schools and had SAT tutors, and I wonder if I'm smart enough to be there, she told David during one of their study sessions. David, who came from a similar background as a first-generation college student, helped Carmen recognize that her life experiences gave her perspectives and insights that were just as valuable as those of her more privileged classmates. The most significant test of the new dynamics in the Sterling household came when Marcus's mother, Margaret Sterling, visited for the holidays. Margaret was a traditional woman who had strong opinions about marriage, social status, and appropriate behavior. She was confused and disapproving of the changes she observed in her son's household. I don't understand this arrangement you have with Elena, she told Marcus during a private conversation. You're living like roommates, not like a married couple. And since when do you employ the maid as a research assistant? It's all very irregular. Marcus found himself defending choices that he was still learning to understand himself. Elena and I are happier now than we've been in years, he explained. We respect each other and work together toward common goals. Isn't that more important than maintaining appearances? Appearances matter, Marcus, his mother replied. You have a reputation to consider, a position in society. People will talk about these unconventional arrangements. The conversation forced Marcus to clarify his own values and priorities. He realized that his mother's concerns about social expectations no longer seemed as important to him as his own sense of integrity and the well-being of the people he cared about. Elena faced similar pressure from some of her old social circle, who couldn't understand why she would choose to return to school instead of focusing on maintaining her marriage and social position. Several former friends made subtle comments about her choices that revealed their disapproval. Elena, dear, I'm sure this architecture program is interesting, said Patricia Whitman during a charity luncheon. But don't you think you should be focusing on saving your marriage instead of these academic pursuits? Elena found that these comments no longer had the power to make her doubt herself. My marriage is stronger now than it's been in years, she replied confidently. Marcus and I support each other's growth instead of holding each other back. Carmen faced different, but equally challenging social pressures. Some of her friends and family members couldn't understand why she had turned down a higher-paying job opportunity in order to continue her education and work part-time for the Sterlings. You had a chance to make real money, Mija, her cousin Sandra told her. Instead, you're still cleaning rich people's houses and playing student. When are you going to grow up and be practical? Carmen had to learn to trust her own judgment about what would serve her long-term goals, even when well-meaning family members questioned her choices. By the end of the year, the Sterling household had achieved a stability and harmony that none of them had thought possible during the crisis months earlier. The painful revelation of Marcus and Carmen's inappropriate relationship had ultimately led to positive changes for everyone involved. Marcus had found a healthier work-life balance and was developing interests and relationships beyond his business empire. Elena had reclaimed her sense of purpose and independence while maintaining a meaningful partnership with her husband. Carmen was thriving academically and personally while working toward her goal of becoming an educator and social advocate. The household staff worked in an environment of greater respect and transparency. The Sterling Foundation was making a genuine difference in the community. Most importantly, all the relationships were based on honesty rather than pretense. A year ago, I thought the discovery of Marcus's feelings for Carmen would destroy our family. Elena reflected during her final session with Dr. Hoffman before the therapist's retirement. Instead, it forced us to confront problems we had been avoiding and to build something new and better. What do you think made the difference? Dr. Hoffman asked. I think we all chose growth over blame, Elena replied. Instead of focusing on who was wrong or who was hurt, we tried to understand what the situation was telling us about what we needed to change in our lives. The Sterling Mansion, which had once been a place of hidden tensions and unspoken resentments, had become a home where people could pursue their authentic selves while supporting each other's growth. The shocking truth that had once threatened to destroy everything had ultimately set them all free to create something better than what they had lost. As Carmen prepared to graduate and begin her teaching career, as Elena worked toward her master's degree and expanded the foundation's reach, and as Marcus continued to explore who he was beyond his business identity, they all carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the most devastating revelations can become the foundation for the most positive transformations. The billionaire who had once walked in on a crisis had learned that true wealth lay not in power and control, but in honest relationships and the courage to grow beyond the limitations of old patterns. The maid who had once been caught in an impossible situation had discovered her own strength and worth. The wife who had felt invisible had found her voice and her purpose. Their story had begun with shocking secrets and painful betrayals, but it had evolved into something none of them had expected, a testament to the possibility of redemption, growth, and the creation of authentic relationships built on truth rather than illusion. Ding her own emotions and in developing strategies for moving forward. She remained committed to her job at the Sterling household, but she also began exploring other opportunities that might provide greater financial security and independence. As winter approached, the Sterling family settled into their new reality. Marcus focused on salvaging the troubled merger while working on his personal issues and therapy. Elena prepared for the start of graduate school in January and continued to rebuild her sense of identity and purpose. Carmen maintained her professional duties while pursuing her academic goals and exploring future opportunities. The immediate crisis had passed, but all three of them knew that the deeper work of healing and rebuilding their lives was just beginning. The secrets and lies that had poisoned their household had been exposed, but the process of creating new, healthier relationships would take time and continued effort from all of them. The shocking revelation that had brought their carefully constructed world crashing down had also opened the door to more honest and authentic ways of living. Whether they could walk successfully through that door remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, all three of them felt that they were facing reality rather than hiding from it. You didn't ruin our marriage, Elena told her firmly. Marcus and I have been having problems for years. What happened with you was a symptom of those problems, not the cause. Carmen accepted their offer to let her keep her position, but she insisted on maintaining strict professional boundaries going forward. She also asked Elena if she could occasionally seek advice about her academic pursuits, since she had found their conversation to be more helpful than she had expected. Elena agreed, recognizing that she might benefit from having a project to focus on during the difficult months ahead as she and Marcus worked through their marital issues. The immediate crisis had been addressed, but the underlying problems remained. Marcus struggled with his feelings for Carmen while trying to honor his commitment to maintain professional boundaries. Elena began preparing for graduate school while working to understand what she wanted from her marriage and her life. Carmen focused on her studies and work while trying to process the emotional complexity of the situation she had been involved in. The Sterling household settled into a new, more honest routine, but everyone involved knew that the revelations and decisions of the past few weeks were just the beginning of a longer and more difficult process of change. Intelligent, beautiful, passionate about life in ways that I had forgotten were possible. Elena and I have been strangers for years. Elena felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The conversation confirmed her worst suspicions about the tension she had been sensing in her household. Her husband was having an emotional affair with their young employee. Instead of bursting into the room immediately, Elena stepped back and tried to process what she had heard. The betrayal felt devastating, but it also explained so many things that had puzzled her recently. Marcus's distraction, Carmen's nervous behavior, the strange atmosphere in their home. Elena quietly retreated to the kitchen, where she sat alone trying to decide how to handle the situation. Part of her wanted to confront them immediately, but another part wanted to gather more information and think through her response carefully. The revelation forced Elena to examine her own feelings about her marriage. While she felt deeply hurt by Marcus's betrayal, she also had to acknowledge that their relationship had been deteriorating for years. They had grown apart, stopped communicating meaningfully, and settled into a routine that satisfied neither of them. As Elena sat in her kitchen, processing the shocking discovery about her husband's affair with their maid, she realized that this moment would force all of them to confront truths they had been avoiding. The careful facade of their perfect life was about to crumble, and nothing would ever be the same again. Air beginning to affect the entire household. James noticed that Mr. Sterling seemed distracted and that Carmen appeared nervous whenever the family was mentioned. Maria and Rosa exchanged worried glances when they observed Carmen's behavior around their employer. None of them could have predicted how dramatically their carefully maintained world was about to change. The secrets that each of them carried were about to collide in a confrontation that would expose truths, destroy relationships, and force everyone involved to face the consequences of their choices and feelings. The stage was set for a revelation that would change all of their lives forever.